Hey everyone, welcome back to Cruise class. And in today's lesson, as promised, we'll be looking at an example of how we can find the regression equation and also utilize it to estimate a variable. Now, we're going to use the same example that we have been using thus far. So all these values that we see right here, the sum of x, the sum of y, the sum of xy, the sum of x squared, the sum of y squared, and n being 6, all of these values were already determined from our correlation video. So you can go back to that video. I'll leave the link in this video so that you can see how we came up with these values if you need just to jog your memory a bit. Now remember the two variables that we're dealing with. The variable x is called the number of sales calls, and the variable y is the number of items sold. So keep that in mind. And the regression equation, as we learned previously, is equal to y is, or rather the regression equation is y equal a plus bx. Now, in order to determine this equation, which is what we want to do, because the question said determine the regression equation. To determine the equation, we need to find a and b. And remember, we need to find b first because b is necessary in order for us to find a. So to find b, it would be the sum, or rather n, which is 6, multiplied by the sum of x times y, which would be 6 times 6,300, minus the sum of x, which is 130, multiplied by the sum of y, which is 260, all divided by n, which is 6 again, multiplied by the sum of x squared, which is 3,500, minus the sum of x, which is 130, all squared. And we just put the square at the 130. Now when we work out the numerator, 6 times 6,300 minus 130 times 260, we get 4,000. And when we work out the denominator, we get 6 times 3,500 minus 130 squared, which is 4,100. And that would be our gradient, otherwise known as b, and that is 0.98. So we found b, now it's time to find a. Now to find a, it would be equal to the sum of y, which is 260, minus b multiplied by the sum of x, which would be b, we found to be 0.98, multiplied by the sum of x, which is 130, all divided by n, and n is 6 because we have 6 data points. So when we work out everything, we get 132.6 divided by 6, which is 22.1. So this would be a, otherwise known as our y-intercept. So now that we have a and b, all we have to do is plug in the values for a and plug in the value for b, and then it would be the regression equation. So we're going to put a here, and then we're going to put b beside the x. So therefore, the regression equation is y equal 22.1 plus 0.98x. Now, if the b value was a negative value, instead of putting plus, we would have just put a negative value. However, it's positive in this case, so we just put plus 0.98x. And we can use this equation to now find any variable given that we have a particular situation. As we see in this example, it says determine the number of items sold if 25 sales calls are made. Now remember, number of sales calls is represented by x, the number of items sold is represented by y. So basically, the number of items sold is y, so they want us to find y given that we have 25 sales calls and the sales calls are x. So basically, they want us to find y given that x is 25. So if x is 25, all we do is substitute 25 where x is in our regression equation, and we get 25 times 98 plus 22.1 will give us 46.6 items sold. So really and truly, we could round it up to 47 items sold as a more accurate estimate. And this is how we use the regression equation to estimate variables.